Okay, I think we can go ahead and just begin and get started, and then anyone else who wants to filter in will be more than welcome to do so as the reading goes on. So, hello and welcome to Young Writers for Democratic Action presents Writers Read for Change. We'd like to begin by thanking the National Steering Committee of Writers for Democratic Action for their support in the creation of our youth branch, which just formed this January. We'd also like to thank Books and Books for their support in organizing this event and all the wonderful work that they do. You can't see it, but Sophie Perez of Books and Books is here in the wing helping us out and running tech for this event. So we'd like to extend a big thank you to her as well. This reading is in support of Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders offers medical humanitarian assistance to people based solely on need, irrespective of race, religion, gender, or political affiliation. Their teams of doctors, nurses, logisticians, and other frontline workers are often among the first on scene when people's lives are upended by conflict, disease outbreaks, or natural or human-made disasters. Of their work, they say, "We believe that the principles of impartiality and neutrality are not synonymous with silence. When the world turns its back on crisis, we are duty-bound to raise our voices and speak out on behalf of our patients. Our decision to do so is always guided by our mission to do no harm, preserve respect and dignity, and protect life and health." You can learn more by visiting doctorswithoutborders.org, and we encourage you to please donate if you have the means to do so. In the spirit of Doctors Without Borders, we will be presenting readings centered around the globe and from all different perspectives and generations. 5 members each from the youth and national committees will read for a few minutes each, and we'll finish out the event with a brief Q&A. I'd like to extend an invitation to those watching to please submit their questions to the Q&A button for the end, as these will be your questions that we'll be answering. I'm so excited that everyone is here, and I'm very excited to be in community with everyone all together. And I hope you are as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first reader. Evan Wang was the first Youth Poet Laureate of Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in Poetry, the Kenyon Review, the Journal, Rhino, and elsewhere, and has been featured at and recognized by the White House, Button Poetry, NPR, and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. He is the recipient of the 2024 Fugue Poetry Prize, selected by Divya Victor. Everyone, please extend a hand for Evan.
Thank you, Bella, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you so much for having me here. It is an honor to be among such esteemed poets. I will be reading one poem today, and it's titled, "I Hate It Everywhere." But I lie, because here is God's silent wound, my wet market of things that don't stay dead. Here, I save squirrels so keen on drowning in the creek I once killed a snake in. I feed halved worms to the dirt, thinking it would save me, and it does. In daylight, my grandmother brings posts to the ground with her worm shovel, digging gardens in our backyard cemetery, ruining more and more. The graves are beginning to look like homes. To survive, I behead sunflowers that I have adored. I ignore the shattered skull of a snake on the road while returning home. I am always on my way home. All the while, across America, there are boys kicked onto streets for love, a dog giving birth to a litter of puppies, towns mistaken for cities. These things stay dead. It's better that way. All over, children skip atop nameless dogs and soldiers. There are enough spaces to die in. There is everything and everywhere to die in. Thank you.
That was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much, Evan. Our next reader is the writer and journalist Jackie Leiden, who is an award-winning NPR host correspondent for over 3 decades, hosting flagship NPR shows and reporting throughout the US, the UK, and especially the Middle East. She is the author of Daughter of the Queen of Sheba, a memoir the New York Times called a classic. She is the American Psychiatric Association Patient Advocate of the Year for 2021, and she is a Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellow. She is a member of the National Steering Committee for Writers for Democratic Action and its Wisconsin State Chair. Since 2017, she's led writing workshops in the US and Ireland with Pulitzer and National Book Award-winning writers. Her new memoir is called Tell Me Something Good. She lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Delafield, Wisconsin, with her husband, Bill O'Leary, a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer for the Washington Post. A frequent public speaker, she's represented by the Tuesday Agency. Please put a hand together for Jackie Leiden.
Thank you, Bella. I just want to say, Bella and you young writers, we are indebted to you, and we are all so excited to be in your presence, to hear from you, to share and uplift your voices. So gratitude abounds here. Thanks. So Tell Me Something Good is a memoir I've struggled with for a while, and it weaves the 34 years of reportage and what you learn and observe and to what length you would go for a story with the history of radio itself, which, as you'll hear in just these few pages, begins in my hometown. And it will eventually take me to Clifton, Ireland, my ancestral hometown, where Marconi, who invents radio, broadcast the first signals to Canada. It begins with a phrase from August of 1980. I was interviewing a farmer. There's a saying, they aren't making any more, but that's what you got. You got what the good Lord put here, because this land, that's all there's ever going to be. You can't make it. And if this farm is ever tore up, I hope I'm either dead or 100,000 miles away from here. I don't never want to come back. George Smith, Waukesha County, August 1980. For a long, long time, I talked on the radio. I talked and I listened and I held a microphone in my hand and in the air, or I spoke into the air over a microphone, and the world seemed to be on the other side of it. This was how I knew the shimmering universe with my instrument, and that was how I knew myself, as if the microphone were the road that I was born on, or a flute that sang the world's stories, a flute given to me by the gods to hold against strife. My destiny, I thought, would be the secrets this flute could convert, like music, the world's speech, the cries and joys and confessions of my fellow human beings. My intimacies would be the conversations I held with you and yours, as if we were all souls created on the lyres of our voices. I would be, in some ancient Celtic tradition, a story carrier. And this I was. I roamed from the Midwest to the Middle East, from farms in Nebraska and Iowa to ancient caves and villages in the regions of northern Mesopotamia, Israel, Kurdistan, Palestine. I told stories on the Mississippi River and from the catacombs of Paris and from canoes in Wisconsin and under bridges in Nashville, amid refuse and empty liquor bottles and waste of all kinds. If it was there, whatever it was, I stepped in it. And so, by the way of all this, from long ago things that still hum in the air, I was made human, a human being from the words of other people's stories and passions, a glimmer of energy, a burst of light, a cataclysm which coruscates and scars as the stories themselves are made, breath to breath or gasp to gasp. The truth is, there are always shadows around a story. The time came when the flute's magic was taken away, and I was sent back to those shadows. And I heard for a time my voice in the air grow fainter and then vanish. And as it did, I felt the voice of my heart stop. It would be a long time before I found it again, and I wondered if the people in my baskets of stories would tumble back to earth from the air. The first intimation I ever had of my own words being powerful on the air came when I heard them by way of a radio transmitter tower I can actually see, standing resolute on Lapham Peak, a mile and a half away. It's a sonic and spiritual loop between Lapham Peak and me, most vivid when the tower's lights remind me of the urgency of human existence. The peak is the tallest around, over 1,200 feet high, a thrust of glacial topography known as the Kettle Moraine, formed in the last ice age in Wisconsin 15,000 years ago. In my county, the moraines rise above the southern shores of a lake, the Ho-Chunk named called Negaweka. There is sand there. And at night, our lake of language is mirrored in clouds and darkness, ringed in tamarack and oak forest, and instead of native campfires, pulsing lights bisect the sky. The radio tower is my last gaze into darkness before I put the world away, to say that from the beginning, these waves are in my blood. Public radio. The tower belongs to WHAD, the D being Delafield for Wisconsin, 90.7 FM. A reassurance in these words that I am still alive. My hometown transmits this signal, the oldest in the country, from Madison to eastern Dane County to Jefferson and Waukesha counties, east to Milwaukee, across Lake Michigan, and up to Mars. The radio transmitter tower has been going since 1948, a half a dozen years before I was born. Radio is not only a thing of magic, it is science. And the WHAD tower is my campanile even today, especially after moonrise. I set the coffee to brew for the next morning. I put the dog out one last time. I close down the house for sleep. I stare at the red blinking eye of WHAD transmitter. Words sail over me, somewhere even above the spring and fall migrations of the geese. There are other times I'm certain I've heard voices in the air, and I tell myself there can only be the geese or the sandhills that you'd be hearing, Jackie. I'm upended by the eeriness of this, because more than once, even though I know better, I could swear they're calling my name.
Bella, you're mute.
It always does this to me. Thank you so much, Jackie. Our next reader is Emi Maeda. She is the 2024-2025 Youth Poet Laureate of Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Her work is published or forthcoming in the New York Seikatsu newspaper, the Unoya Review, and the Rising Phoenix Review, and has been recognized by the Japanese Consulate General, the Lower Marion County Library System, and the Alliance for Young Writers and Artists. For young artists and writers. Her work has won prizes in both English and Japanese, and she is a graduate of the Kenyan Young Writers Workshop and the Iowa Young Writers Studio. Everyone, please welcome Emi.
Hello. Hi. It's such an honor to be here for such a great cause and with such great people. Can everyone hear me all right? This is my first time using Crowdcast. Okay, great. So I have one quick poem for everyone today. This is actually a poem that I wrote with another group of wonderful people, my friends who are all connected with the similar experiences of being first generation and second generation immigrants. So this is The Nuclear Family. To say we swung the fence through inky air and cut across the overgrown lawn onto the streets, chasing after one another, the damp cement caving against the feet we used to run towards instead of away like we wanted to be. That night, NASA launched a spacecraft to Mars, an immigrant in the making like us. Though instead of the atmosphere, we only orbited those streets we followed over and over in an attempt to map out our place among parked cars. Our flashlights etched a draw out of darkness for all the neighbors to see the yelling. Say earthquake, say tsunami, say the funeral is tomorrow. One of us sobs an empty threat of defection. Say the wave carried the dead and now they can love for as far as they'd like, even all the way here. It became the first time a father cried into his daughter's arms, but to say I am a good daughter is to forget how easily I blame the whole world on my parents, when all I do is write poems until that night feels nostalgic. To say it's only ever been the four of us. To say there was only cement, an earthquake, and a family running through the streets, all of us trying to bring each other home. Thank you so much.
Now I'm unmuted. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Emi. Our next reader is Joanne Mort, who is a poet and journalist. Her first book of poetry, A Precise Chaos, will be published in the spring of 2025 by Aerosmith Press. She lives in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Everyone, please welcome Joanne.
Thank you. And as others have said, this is just so inspirational to be with this new generation of activists and writers. It's really a privilege to be with all of you. I'm going to read a poem that is about a previous horrible global situation that was resolved. And I decided to do that while I do write about the current world. I wanted to read something that shows some hope. It was a pretty awful time to live through the Bosnian War and the breakup of Yugoslavia, and it did get resolved in a peaceful situation. And there's still a struggle for democracy over there, but it's a hopeful trajectory. So this is not a hopeful poem, but let's just remember where it all ended up. And it's about the city of Mostar, which is in Bosnia, and it was a Muslim majority city. In Mostar, city of bridges. I recognize the hotel on the evening news. You tell me the outdoor cafe is now a mass grave, bodies piled on top of the patio where I sat just a year ago, sipping cold beer served by a waiter in a formal vest and bow tie. Bullet holes through its corridors, its spine, its doorways, windows shattered into the river flowing below until the river is a congested mixture of glass and blood, like a frozen crimson stream of broken ice in the middle of summer. All the cafes along the Neretva River are blown to pieces. The red-headed Muslim woman who tended bar, cigarette in hand, espresso cup empty by the ashtray, one gold hoop in her ear, sleeveless black t-shirt. Now she is a refugee, or worse. The old town, the Turkish bridge, they will build it good as new, you predict. One summer we sipped beer by a river laced with minarets, each thin tower extending like an arm waving its way through delicate nature, these travelers from the 16th century. These treacherous and beautiful mountains, their heated, sun-drenched stone rising toward a sky that offers nothing. A god torn in so many pieces, he explodes across the countryside. You've gone to find a part for your motorbike. I sip my beer, order another. You arrive in time to pay for it in dinars. We walk together past the begging Roma children and the political posters that couldn't portend how the world will erupt when civil politics becomes anathema. Soon we will drive to the ferry stop to return to the island. Drink grappa holed from the Dalmatian coast. We stare silently at the clear water. Relief boats, mined harbors, naval blockades, body parts on the street splayed like a child's forgotten playset. There's a stray leg, a finger. The unclouded Adriatic, your tiny villa, your garden with lemons and rosemary, the puny tangerines. We finish our beer at the edge of the mass grave as we sit outside the Grand Hotel. You tuck dinars beneath the beer mugs. We walk arm in arm past the children. The spires rise through the flames. Bullet holes turn their slender arms into sieves that ooze out centuries of something that almost resembled civilization.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joanne. Our next reader is Lily Schechner, a rising senior in high school residing in Silver Spring, Maryland, where she serves as the city's youth poetry ambassador. Her writing has been recognized by the Pulitzer Center, One Teen Story, and the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, as well as published in the Penn Review, National Poetry Quarterly, the Incandescent Review, and more. Everyone, please put a hand together for Lily.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And as everyone has already said, it's so amazing to be here with so many other amazing poets and writers and activists. I'm going to be reading a poem that is inspired by an article called These Women Are Bringing Some Peace to War-Stricken Congo, which is a Pulitzer Center article by Hugh Kinsella Cunningham, Camille Mobert, and Sifa Bahati. And it is called The Bush is for the Animals, Not for the People. Masumbuko, 1996. We don't know it yet, but we will be in the hills of Ituri longer than we will be alive, taking dirt-packed roads to churches, schools, football stadiums, with our oil-slick sleeves held over the heads of cubs, not yet wolves. And we don't know it yet, but to war relentlessly is to love the wolves, among the purple-streaked skies and the fronds caressing them. For we remember the months when it wasn't fruitless and blood-stained, and we don't know it yet. But the wolves may have been our sons and lovers, but they were never our friends. When we stop recognizing them, we will tell each other that we women can no longer keep our arms crossed. And we don't know it yet, but we will sleep on the floor with no warmth curled at our hips beneath the blankets, but our bodies will harden, our skin will become blue-tinged steel, and we don't know it yet, but our trembling voices are ciphers to those wolves in green and red, the ones we used to know who live in forests. For when their pupils fuse with the ones who birthed them, men cannot refuse to listen. And we don't know it yet, but one full moon we will place our palms on the wolves' foreheads and say, gently, the bush is for the animals, not for the people. It will be calm that night. Women in white dresses will walk these roads. The men will keep their promise. Thank you.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Lily. Our next reader is Jim Carroll, the author of novels, works of history, and for 23 years, weekly op-ed columns in the Boston Globe. Winner of the National Book Award, he is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Everyone, please welcome Jim.
Thank you so much, Bella. I add my words of appreciation to you for convening us. I'm so honored to be with my fellow writers, younger and older. And I truly welcome the opportunity to lift up with you the hopeful and urgent Doctors Without Borders. And I welcome this opportunity to call to mind the people of Palestine and the people of Israel. I am reading two poems from the Palestinian Mahmoud Darwish and from the Israeli Yehuda Amichai. Jews in the Land of Israel by Yehuda Amichai, translated by Hannah Bloch. We forget where we came from. Our Jewish names from exile give us away, bring back the memory of flower and fruit, medieval cities, metals, knights who turned to stone, roses, spices, whose scent drifted away, precious stones, lots of red, handcrafts long gone from the world. The hands are gone too. Circumcision does it to us, as in the Bible story of Shechem and the sons of Jacob, so that we go on hurting all our lives. What are we doing coming back here with this pain? Our longings are drained together with the swamps. The desert blooms for us, and our children are beautiful. Even the wrecks of ships that sank on the way reached this shore. Even winds did. not all the sails. What are we doing in this dark land with its yellow shadows that pierce the eyes? Every now and then someone says, even after 40 or 50 years, the sun is killing me. What are we doing with these souls of mist, with these names, with our eyes of forests, with our beautiful children, with our quick blood? Spilled blood is not the roots of trees, but it's the closest thing to roots we have. Who Am I Without Exile? By Mahmoud Darwish, translated by Fadi Yoda. A stranger on the riverbank, like the river, water, binds me to your name. Nothing brings me back from my far away to my palm tree, not peace and not war. Nothing makes me enter the Gospels. Not a thing, nothing sparkles from the shore of ebb and flow between the Euphrates and the Nile. Nothing makes me descend from the Pharaoh's boats. Nothing carries me or makes me carry an idea, not longing and not promise. What will I do? What will I do without exile and a long night that stares at the water? Water binds me to your name. Nothing takes me from the butterflies of my dreams to my reality, not dust and not fire. What will I do without roses from Samarkand? What will I do in a theater that burnishes the singers with its lunar stones? Our weight has become light like our houses in the faraway winds. We have become two friends of the strange creatures in the clouds, and we are now loosened from the gravity of identity's land. What will we do? What will we do without exile and a long night that stares at the water? Water binds me to your name. There's nothing left of me but you, and nothing left of you but me, the stranger massaging his stranger's thigh. Oh, stranger, what will we do with what is left to us of calm and of a snooze between two myths? And nothing carries us, not the road and not the house. Was this road always like this from the start? Or did our dreams find a mare on the hill among the Mongol horses and exchange us for it? And what will we do? What will we do without exile? My friends, thank you for this important act of literature and for this important act of solidarity.
Amazing. Thank you, Jim. Our next reader is Asselt Melnichuk, who has published 5 books of fiction. A book of poetry and a volume of essays will appear next year. He's published poetry, fiction, translations, and reviews in The Nation, The Paris Review, The New Yorker, The Washington Post, The Harvard Review, and elsewhere. He's guest editor for a special issue of Irish Pages on the war in Europe coming this September. Everyone, please welcome Askell.
Thank you so much, Bella. Privileged to be here with all of you this afternoon. I want to say, as Emerson said to Whitman, I greet you all at the start of a brilliant career. As writers, we're always starting over. We're always beginning again. Speaking of beginnings, I began as a poet, and before the fiction thing began to take over. And I'm going to be reading a poem that is picking up on a number of the themes that people have already touched on: exile, war, history. And the question the poem asks is, what do you do with this after it's over? Um, how, what sense do we make of it? Is it possible to make sense of it? A couple of references I just want to explain. So my parents were refugees from Ukraine, and I'll be referring to a couple of cities there. Lviv, Peremyśl is actually in Poland. Berchtesgaden is where the refugee camp they spent 5 years in was in Germany. And there's another phrase also in Ukrainian in the poem. It's Otche nasz, and that translates simply as our Father, as in our Father who art in, etc. Okay, so the poem is titled The Sunday Before Easter, and it has an epigraph from the German poet Friedrich Hölderlin. The epigraph goes as follows: Dreadful it is how here and there, endlessly, God disperses whatever lives. The Sunday Before Easter, 1. I prayed each twilight with the crickets, as a boy to another boy, wrapped in his mother's blue-gowned arms. Otche nasz. Concentration is prayer. Poetry, the private psalm. Sunday before Easter, before dawn revives the city with its debonair starlings, startled by weather to wooing. Behind my desk, from where in the window I can see your double, I pray the only way I can. I tell you my stories because they are mysteries, because the little God who dwells within, reflecting God, creating worlds with names, remembers. My country, formerly the sun, became the oil-slicked water, sapped pine barrens and barren suburbia, the Venice of New Jersey, since it flooded every year. At times, mountains and ignitable polluted air feel familiar as the silk of your bed, the blue-gold silk of your breasts. Lviv, Peremyśl, Berchtesgaden. There God flared in his latest conflagration, disguised in brown or agonized green. Booted, buckled, mustache trimmed, chin shaped clean as an apple, proud of himself, his shining discipline, the moral courage to shelve tobacco, moonlight, women. He puffed himself especially on his talent for division, like that evolutionary wonder, the amoeba, for rising early, spitting in his own glum sun, showering in splinters of ice water without wincing, marching in unison with himself, raising legs muscled as if modeled by Rodin. And he was proud of his spired libraries outstripping Alexandria, where the dead speak and the living are silent. He visited a museum ransomed by lions, accompanied by an interpreter from the far city of Babel. God torched houses. He castrated boys, inspired women burning for food to murder their husbands. He turned his people back to light. I saw none of this, but I remember. I remember and rehearse it for you. Who else could balance the scales of justice? These fairy tales mother lent me for lullabies. What once delivered me to sleep now keeps me up long after the emaciated hands of the clock unclasp and splay to quarter cross, and the cat and you sleep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Askell. Our next reader is Elizabeth Shue. who is the 8th Youth Poet Laureate of Houston, Texas. She was a semifinalist for the 2023-2024 National Student Poet. She is a poetry alumnus of the Adroit Journal Summer Mentorship and the Iowa Young Writers Studio. Find her poetry forthcoming or published in NPR, Houston Public Media, Rust and Moth, Mini Mag, and elsewhere. Everyone, please put a hand together for Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Bella. I'm extremely grateful to be here, and I'll be reading a piece about something that I know many of my peers relate to, as I've had discussions with some about it, specifically the growing culture of how marginalized writers in particular are at times pushed to commodify their generational trauma, culture, their heritage, etc. The title of this piece is "This is Not a Cultural Poem." Really, it isn't. My mother stands, a stiff kitchen towel on its side, playing chopsticks as pinning forceps. She shows me the silk knots on her wrist, teaches me how to suture a wound. I've read this poem before. There are motifs like cutting fruit as a sign of love. Perhaps someone throws in mango diaspora imagery and calls it a day. My peers jam phrases to mimic the hereditary line break and win awards for the poems that hurt the most. The culture teaches me to excise, not to write. I rip out temporary sutures before the wound has healed, cut the heart open, and dig up something deemed worthy of preservation. The liberal, rich white socialites fawn over the young POC writer who performs their ethnic hardship. When I trade my identity work for fun summary pieces about gas stations, suddenly you ask if my poetry is necessary. I let you workshop my writing, and it always hurts, teaching me how to tear up hereditary stitches, revising to lacerate, not to mend. You go deep and you dig deeper. If tearing up wounds makes better art, search for necessity all you want. What are you looking for besides my colored pain?
Incredible. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Our next reader is Jill McCorkle, who is the author of 7 novels and 5 story collections. Her latest novel, Hieroglyphics, was published in 2020, and her new collection, Old Crimes, was published in January 2024. Her work has appeared in numerous periodicals, and 4 of her short stories have been selected for Best American Short Stories. She has taught at Harvard, Brandeis, North Carolina State, and in the Bennington College Writing Seminars. Everyone, please welcome Jill.
Thank you, Bella. Again, like everyone else, it's such an honor to be here. You guys fill me with hope. So just keep it coming. I'm going to read the opening of a story called The Last Station. Once a year, just as the dogwoods are about to come into bloom, Tori's mother straps a makeshift cross to her back and begins her trek across the front yard, stopping 12 times just as Jesus had done over 2,000 years before. With each stop, she shouts out various social injustices she has witnessed during the year. She was for a time artistic program director at the elementary school, where she worked for 35 years as the librarian. Elaborate productions of Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz to her credit. So of course she's aware of the dramatic and sometimes humorous effect her show has on those who stop and watch. Tori's mother knows the power of comic relief and relies on it often when she's in danger of offending others. Politically, she leans left of center, not always a popular place to be in the Bible Belt, and yet she's managed to maintain a position of respect and authority in a very conservative town, even as people often talk behind her back or circle an index finger up to the head, whispering words like nuts. Still, the majority chooses to overlook these things because her success rate with the children who experienced her tutelage surpassed that of anyone else in the town's elementary school system. Children who were painfully shy learned to step forward with confidence, and those inclined to make trouble seemed to turn things around in ways that surprised even the parents. Tori knows that there was probably some bribing going on because that's what she experienced all through childhood. If you can learn the beginning to the Gettysburg Address and ask to recite it before your class, I'll get you a puppy. Tori's fourth grade teacher was a confirmed racist, and Tori's mother had led a statewide campaign to change the way people discussed the Civil War in classrooms. Are you bribing her again? Tori's dad had called from the next room. Positive reinforcement, Tori recalled her mother saying. It might look like a bribe, but when it's for doing the right thing, I call it positive reinforcement. In the beginning, Tori's mother's walks were all about what she felt was best for the children of the town, the state, the country, the world. She wrote a piece for the local paper that got picked up and reprinted across the state. She was outraged that theirs was a state where physical punishment was still allowed, that pre-K programs had been cut down to nothing, and that they were threatening to take away the free breakfast offered to those kids who arrived at school with empty stomachs and pockets. Hello, Tori's mother liked to call out to the audience. This is in the Bible, folks. Jesus said he was hungry and no one fed him. He knocked on the door and no one answered. And guns? Don't even get her started. Her calm storytelling voice grew louder as she made her way across the yard, each station a little more dramatic as she put forward the plea that people paid more attention to their children. They will be in charge of you someday, she liked to say. You're going to get old and die, right? She would ask the quiet crowd. But then she knew just when to turn the tide to something most everyone could embrace, expanding her attention to local news stories or what she saw as unfortunate fashion choices. Are folks as tired of reality television as I am, and of people being famous just because they were born rich? She looked around for affirmation. Let the poncho return, but for God's sake, don't reclaim the wide tie or leisure suit and jumpsuits. Who said they could come back? And who gives a damn about keeping up with whoever, or those who just keep having children just so they can get on television? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Fabulous, Jill. Thank you so much. It was beautiful. I'll finish this out. My name is Bella Rotker, and I'm the youngest member of the National Steering Committee, and I founded the Youth Committee, which I currently chair. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and now am a rising senior majoring in creative writing at Interlochen Arts Academy, where I'm preparing to do my spring semester abroad, doing artistic and humanitarian work in Venezuela. So I will read a little bit from a couple different things. If my mother is in the audience, just pretend you're not in this film. This is: the Cuyahoga River caught fire at least 12 times. Lately, I've been thinking about wild animals. Weeds growing up the side of the highway guardrails, the patch of tulips outside the waste management facility. I watch my reflection shift in puddles of oil. After my first heartbreak, my mother drove me out into the Everglades in the middle of the night. The sky was pale gray and milky, and there, my mother explained to me what light pollution was. She said, girls love like wildfires, and boys were made to love how beautiful the heat is. That boys watch their reflections in shiny objects flickering like candles. That they have to wait for heartbreak to make them human. I have to laugh, because what else is there to say? Last week, My friend buried a bird in the yard and left a daisy on top. I smelled the rot of its body from the balcony. I watched the sky erase itself, clouds moving thick over our heads. In the aftermath, I fill my room with vines, real ones, and keep track of their decay. This is how I rewrite myself. In the mornings, I take walks by the creek and imagine myself as a slick of oil on the water. When I cut myself on the brush, copper wiring comes tumbling out of my ankles. My mother tells me that this is normal. I watch myself burn in the rear view. And now we'll read a little bit from a sonnet crown, which is entitled Sonnets for Venezuela. And I'm going to start a little bit. Florida. The air is different here. I wake up again in my bed in Pinecrest, you in yours in the city. I'm standing in the inlet, salt reaching across my ankles. Something like grief washes over me, but I don't remember what I lost, except time, or the bats in the park by the apartment that used to be mine, the city we swore was ours, hours under the cover of night. You pointed to Salto Angel and said it was called that because if you stand at the base and look up, there's a real angel waiting. But it's too dark for one now. Everything fades into the shoreline. And this is TV1. There's fires starting across an ocean, and I am at the kitchen table, eyes blurring as I stare up at the news. My mother reminds me I can't pack matches and join them. Something stirs and settles in my stomach. My mother chops the head off a fish and pulls out its bones. The reporter says the worst of it is downtown, says you can smell the burning trash miles from the city. I ask my mom if this means something will change. She grinds herbs, drops the fish in the pan. The oil jumps out at me. I almost can't feel it burn. The fish sears, a body against the heat. What's left fills in after. Thank you. So sweet. Thank you guys so much. So we have a few minutes now for a brief Q&A. To all of those on the other side of the screen, please feel free to send in any questions you may have. In the interest of time, we'll take 3 to 4 answers per question. And I'll start us off so that the audience has some time to submit some questions. Remember that no question is too small. What do you feel writers can do to affect change around them? So anyone can jump in.
I'd like to answer that, only because I don't think that I've only, ever been a writer. I mean, when I think of reportage and I think of trying to tell really difficult stories, especially in places where cultures are hostile to each other, I would always look for writers and poets and novelists to tell us a story. Jim read us the poem from Mahmoud Darwish. I remember interviewing him in Syria because writers, I think, can speak across divide to common humanity. And that is one of the things that Writers for Democratic Action, one reason I'm there is because it is a language of literary democracy. And while our founders had that, Jim Carroll and others, Oskol, Peter Balakian, it is really reinforced that what I was doing all those years hosting at NPR was trying to find those kinds of stories and those kinds of people. It means something. There's something we can do. So that's what I think writers, and this lovely reading, and I'm sorry my internet went out. I went out for 2 days last week and I thought they had it fixed, sorry. Anyway, thank you for asking.
Thank you for that,
I completely agree with that. I think also just to add on to the kind of theme of writing as kind of something that can contribute to politics and political rebellion, I think that in addition to, oh, was I muted?
Nope.
In addition to being something that can kind of be a foundation for humanity and common humanity among people, I think writing can also be an act of political rebellion. I think that it can be a vessel for important messages that kind of going along with that common foundation, people might not be able to hear otherwise. I think people are always more likely to listen to something when it's contained within a music, like a music piece or a poem or a short story, than maybe if it's in, you know, a political speech, or if it's in a flyer, or is kind of being forced down their throats in a different way. I think art can really be a common denominator amongst people in that way, and it can really be a method for them to hear something that they might not be willing to hear otherwise.
Oh, I agree so much with what Lily just said, and I think that when we're putting characters on the page, um, we're often less judgmental and more accepting, as curious to understand the whole portrait of this person. And when you do that, you automatically recognize real people out there, and the differences. And I don't know, as a writer, it makes me more sympathetic in ways I might not be otherwise, or less likely to jump in with a quick dismissal of another human. Thank you.
Yeah, and so if you don't mind, Bella, if it's not too much, just to add to that, one of the things that I would take off even the kind of part about writers, because to me, a writer is simply a citizen. I mean, is first of all a citizen, a member of a community, and the question is, what do you do as a member? What are your responsibilities as part of that community? And I would never want to dictate what those are to anyone. I know writers who are not at all involved in any kind of political action, and absolutely that is their right as well, right? Some of us choose, because of our temperament, because of our personal histories, to engage. We feel it is a privilege to have an opportunity to engage, maybe because we are aware of all those places in the world where, in fact, citizens are not allowed to engage in the building and shaping of their communities. And we speak out of that experience, out of our kind of common experience as citizens with our fellows. So yeah, that's where the kind of foundation for all this lies for me, is and being here with all of you is evidence of one of the things we can do, and that is to speak first of all to each other, and then with our neighbors and fellow citizens about the things that matter to us and to them.
I think also, I keep thinking about Elizabeth's poem that was so moving and really spoke in many ways to this point, I think, in terms of what is political poetry, or what is expected of political poetry. And, to me, I write both journalism and poetry, and the quote facts are in the journalism. The poetry, even when, the poem that I read was about the war in Bosnia, but it was through my eyes, and it was also through a personal experience that I had with someone who was native to the country. And so it wasn't factual in that sense. And I think what we can do as poets or as creative writers is bridge these divides and allow, as some of the others have said, is allow this humanity to come through that we hope can engage people to move toward a better world.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone who chimed in for that. I definitely agree with all your sentiments. As I said in my poem, I've been thinking a lot lately about animals and sort of what separates humans from, say, my beloved dog who is taking a nap on the floor next to me. And I think for me that answers stories. And, to be a human is to be a storyteller. And I think that stories sort of inherently are a form of change. So even those who are not the most politically sort of keyword active of writers are still writers who are affecting change, I think, in my view. We have a question in the chat from Philip Smith, who asks specifically about books and books and the censorship of books in Florida. So we are here sort of in partnership with Books and Books. I can speak on this question briefly because in the past I've worked with Books and Books, who is a beloved member of the community and a beloved sort of source of change in South Miami and, you know, across South Florida. Mitchell, who is the owner of Books and Books and also a member of the National Steering Committee, started the Books and Books Foundation, which Sophie graciously put in the chat for us. So you can find more information there. But Books and Books is sort of a very large motivator against the censorship of books in Florida. And perhaps we can take this opportunity to talk about what WDA is doing about the censorship of books. I know that Jackie and Joanne and Jill have all spoken about this in steering committee meetings and have contributed things for the newsletter on this topic. So perhaps some of the committee members can weigh in sort of on what WDA does against banned books and what we as writers can do.
Again, I'd love to answer that if that's okay, because I'm sure everyone else has a lot to say too, and I don't want to hog the mic, as you used to say, ever to me. But here in Wisconsin, we learned as we were putting together, as Jim Carroll and Rachel DeWaskin and all the people who wrote the script, that we were considered by various committees that look at book banning to be one of the states most at risk for book banning. Something like over 1,000 attempts, and that this came from, you know, a really small group of people. Well, just this past week, I haven't even shared this with most of my colleagues because this only happened a few days ago. With my state co-chair, I went to a school board meeting, first I've ever attended since I covered them as a cub reporter, and they were trying to ban The Handmaid's Tale and The Kite Runner for 2 advanced lit placement classes. These are classes for young people your age, 17 and 18-year-olds. The books are elective. They don't have to read them. The one parent had gathered 860 signatures on a petition to allow these books to stay. My co-chair got 81 signatures on a letter he sent into the school board. Watching the 3 people who were all sponsored by something called WIS Red, let me understand how that these people are never going to listen to reason. And it's something that as writers, we are going to have to call out and figure out our detours around it. Now, as it happened, the chairman of the school board was the casting vote, and he voted in favor of retaining these books. He is Mormon, and he felt that young people needed to have a wide experience. The young people, fellow students of your own ages, oh, they were spectacular. I mean, I really want to get the speeches of these kids and put it on our state page. They were riveting. And I think that's where book bannings must be countered by those of us who don't have kids in the school system, who, you know, who really need to show up, who need to understand how pernicious these things are. And the next day in the Journal Sentinel, and I haven't even shared this yet either, and I will, the guy who was the most one of the most outspoken against these books, it didn't matter what anyone said. I actually think he was praying as the discussion was going on. And indeed, he told the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, "This is between me and my God." And I thought to myself, oh, to hell with everyone else. And it reminded me of being in Tehran in Iran, you know. So that's my real life experience this week in book banning America.
I'd like to add a word to that beautiful statement of Jackie's. And this is for the benefit of folks who are maybe new to the idea of Writers for Democratic Action. It turns out that this movement to ban books, which is a manifestation, a very clear manifestation of the profoundly undemocratic impulses of the right wing in this country, the movement to ban books was, in effect, conscripted those of us who were Writers for Democratic Action early in our project. We started out sort of narrowly focused on opposing the election of Donald Trump, the re-election of Donald Trump in 2020. But pretty soon, we were really forced to see the variety of ways in which the right wing is at work dismantling essential structures of our democracy. And the most blatant might be the attacks on books and literature and the teaching of history and the controlling of curricula in schools. Well, Osgold a moment ago distinguished between the vocation of the writer as writer and the way in which writers can accept the role of activists. But this phenomenon, the attack on literature itself, a political, blatant, open, right-wing attack on literature itself at all levels, absolutely is it's kind of it's like being drafted, being conscripted into a struggle. And every writer feels it, whether writers choose to get actively engaged in the resistance or not. Every writer is at risk when any writer is censored or banned. Concretely, Writers for Democratic Action has made at the center of our effort something called the Democracy Book Club. So every month, we select a book, invite the broad community of Writers for Democratic Action and anyone else through the offices of Books and Books, this center of our work, the great Mitch Kaplan Miami bookstore that is our host today. The Democracy Book Club, it's not accidental that the very first author to whom we extended an invitation was Margaret Atwood, truly one of the great English language writers in the world. And as we all know, her books are being banned all over the place. And if you look at the various other writers who we have focused on in the Democracy Book Club, all of them, practically all of them, in some way or another, are expressly at work resisting this terrible signal of the coming of fascism. Books are banned, and then books are burned, and then the democracy itself is burned to the ground. Let me just say, those of you who are not Writers for Democratic Action, you're welcome to join us. We want you to join us. Please go to the website and sign up.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. With the sentiment and, of course, with the invitation to join WDA. I think that as a student myself and as a resident of South Florida, book banning is something that is less philosophical for me and more of a personal impact. And as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, I think something that I think about often is the sort of parallels of the US with so many other sort of historical events. And it's become a very casual thing, I think, which is frightening to me. I see Instagram posts of my friends, in classrooms that don't have any books in them. And I find that to be horrifying. And I think that there is a lot that we can do as a community that we're, needing to do, right? The least of which is just to speak up, right? And as Jackie shared with us, to attend these school board meetings, right? To be part of this conversation. If you're 18 and you have a little bit of time, run for school board, run for office, right? These are public office jobs. The reason they're called public office is because anyone can run for them. And so I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to go to libraries, get a library card, because that is how libraries get funded. And when libraries are properly funded, they can help fight against book bans. So that's my thought. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this issue? I know we have several students here. Elizabeth is just about to go off to college, and Lily and Emmy are both still in high school as well. So perhaps any of you can talk about this issue. It's something we talk.
Sorry, I would love to talk about this issue since I relate to you, Bella, as well. Since I'm a resident of Texas, and we are not doing that great on the book banning front. Some of you may have heard about the January 2023 ruling by the Texas Supreme Court, where they essentially overtook the Houston Independent School District. They removed the entire school board, replaced its superintendent, and replaced school libraries with disciplinary centers. They completely removed student accessibility to books. They laid off countless librarians. And obviously, it's kind of representative of the irony of the right-wing desire for freedom while actively dismantling intellectual freedom and banning books. I think the issues at my own local level, it really goes hand in hand with all of these issues of censorship, and that something that's important, not just running for school board, but also reaching out directly to students and schools, English teachers, helping people who are currently at the source and currently victim to these issues is critical, while we also commit to assisting this at a larger political and structural level. And for those of you who may not be in areas that are as effective, reaching out your hand and your voice to people who are, we are all extremely thankful for it. So.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So
yeah, I'd like to weigh in my 2 cents as well, because my school also had a problem with some parents trying to ban certain books by Toni Morrison from the curriculum. And it was a, completely incomprehensible almost thought to a lot of us students and teachers, but it was, surprisingly getting a lot of traction and a lot of, at some point we thought it could be possible that it would just be removed from our curricula. And I think, and, being there with so much rhetoric being thrown around, trying to convince us either way, and then also looking at the writing, couldn't help but think, rhetoric, as important as it is, comes from a place of trying to persuade, trying to sometimes even manipulate. But, writing and poetry that I know just comes from a place, within ourselves, to share a part of ourselves. And I think, if we lose either one, it's going to be, a tragedy for a democracy. So, yeah. So it's great to know that people here are working to do something about it.
Thank you for that, Emmy. Yeah, I think also just there is something so easy that a lot of people don't think about in the issue of preventing banned books is go to your library and check out banned books. Just show that they're being circulated. Read them, show that they're needed. Have library cards. I keep mine on me. These are my library cards. Get a library card everywhere you live. If you go to college, have a library card in your hometown and one in your college town, right? Just support those libraries because they're not just books. I mean, books are awesome and they do have books, but they also do advocacy, right? And if you're too busy to spend time in a library, and if you work from home or if you study, do it in a library. They're cool. They're cool places. I think maybe we should spend a few moments talking about what WDA is doing, or how we think about sort of shifting the American political dynamic in terms of the division and the culture wars. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, as writers and as WDA, what are we doing? What can we be doing? how can we sort of bring the country together or bring people together?
I would love to hear, I know I don't want to put the burden on young WDA or why, but I really would love to hear from you guys what we can do to engage more of you. And I'm assuming that a lot of people in the audience are your friends and your colleagues, and how we can get more of you involved, because I'm not only just encouraged by hearing from all of you and your extraordinary creative work also, but I think that is the, you are the future. And so as much as we can do this and do it together, to be able to do this intergenerationally is so exciting. It's very rare in our world right now. We're talking about all these divisions in the world. There isn't a younger and older divide. And I think social media has added to that, since a lot of people who are older are not as engaged in social media. And how we can build something that's a community of these different ages together, I think is just something that probably we didn't think of when we started WDA. I was not there at the very beginning, but now that we're here, let's build on this incredible momentum.
Well, I can just jump in here for a few comments about that from a high schooler's perspective. I can say that I think that youth advocacy and young people in activism is truly thriving, and is thriving now more than ever. I think that one of the only good things about living in a country that is falling back on some very regressive policies is the fact that it really does get so many more people involved, because it just feels so much more urgent. Obviously, activism is always important, but right now it does feel more urgent than ever, especially with these upcoming elections happening this year. And I would say, from my perspective, as someone who is a young person who's trying to be involved in politics, involved in advocacy, what I love to see from people who are either involved in these institutions or who are also activists and advocates in other generations is just a willingness to listen to the issues and the policies that are most important for young people. I think that obviously everyone has different priorities, and that's a product of whether that be demographics or geographic location or any of that. Everyone has different priorities, but a lot of the time, youth are very united around specific policies that maybe older generations either haven't thought of or aren't as exposed to, whether those be involved in education or in just other, spaces that young people occupy more than other generations. So whenever, legislators or other advocates, what are those policies? Well, I can just say that some of the ones that I've advocated for, I've talked to some of my local legislators about book banning. I am really lucky to live in a really liberal area of Montgomery County, Maryland. And we haven't had to deal with those policies that much, but there was a proposed piece of legislation in the Maryland General Assembly that was, making space for book banning to become a possibility in Maryland. So I went to the Maryland General Assembly and I talked to legislators about that. Also, we talked about gender affirming care. We talked about gun reform, which is a huge issue for me. I led a gun reform walkout in my freshman year of high school after the shooting in Uvalde. And, there are so many different niches and policies that people care about. And especially in Montgomery County, youth activism is just, it's completely taken over. There are so many different organizations, so many different people involved, and it's just really amazing to see. And I am always so touched, and I appreciate it so much when other generations and other people who are really entrenched in these topics are willing to listen to people who may not know as much but are really passionate about those issues. So I love to see that. I've seen it a lot in my area. So yeah.
Just kind of commenting on what others have just said, and and I love what you did addressing the Maryland Assembly. When I saw how many young people were speaking, I thought, this must rattle the right. We graybeards and gray hairs can, speak till we're blue and they don't care about us. We're toast anyway. But when you see these really, you're just past adolescence, these young men and women so powerfully articulate what ideas have meant to them, that has to be unsettling. Because how do you contain that magic in the bottle, right? How do you tell a Lily or an Emmy or a Bella or an Elizabeth, to go sit down and shut up? And so I was thinking about what can we tactically do? And I love the notion of, working together. What has been the pushback, in Texas, as those school libraries are used for detention rooms. I think yes, you need us, because I think we're great organizers and we've been around and maturity does count, but it really counts to have the tip of the spear. And that's what all of you young writers are.
Thank you, Jackie. I can speak for probably most of the youth committee to say that we're so proud to be a member of WDA and to represent youth to WDA and WDA to youth. A lot of us, myself included, sort of grew up on the stories of the members of the National Steering Committee. And it's funny because I think about a year ago now, I met Carolyn Forche, a member of the National Steering Committee, for the first time at Miami Book Fair. And I was starstruck. I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, Carolyn, hi. And, and now we're on a committee with her. And I think that just having the work be between generations is what makes it so meaningful. It's not just the youth population that we represent. It's not just writers that we represent. It's not just, the oldsters, as you first referred to yourselves. It's not WDA, all caps. It's people, right? We are people, and we want the government to do their job, which is to work for us, right? It is a representative democracy for a reason, and that is because they are supposed to be representative of our ideals. And I think I'll talk, being a student from Michigan, about Big Gretch, who I'm a huge fan of. And she's, for those who don't know, Gretchen Whitmer is the hugely, immensely popular Democratic governor of Michigan. And what a lot of people don't know about her is that she won not just by a landslide, but she turned red counties, right? She won in Trump counties. She won in rural farm counties. And her advice, and she says this in almost every interview when people ask her how she did it, how she turned these deeply red counties, was she went to them and she said, what do you want from me? What can I do for you? Right. And I think that is something that even as people, we need to learn to do more of, right? Is just talking to people and saying, what can I do for you? Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter, what you believe. Like, that is your prerogative. To me, it's about a sort of greater sense of social change, because this democracy, the purpose of democracy, is so that everyone benefits, right? And no one is benefiting if we're just fighting, right? If anything, we're being harmed by all of this fighting. So I think that just talking, to me, is the simplest way to start that. So that's what I advocated for in my position as youth lieutenant governor. It's something that I continue to strive for. And I think that it's, having youth be involved in politics, having school board members be college students, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are affected by those decisions most directly, right? To have school board members not just be people who can pay for their campaigns, but people who have children in schools, right? People who are not just sending their kids to private school, because what's the point of being on the school board if your kids are not in the school, right? So I think there's a lot that we can do just to have a grassroots movement. I think there's a lot we can do to bring people together.
I'm ready to vote for you any minute, Bella. All of you. I'm ready.
Thank you, Jill. That's sweet. Maybe we can end a little bit talking about, since this reading is in support of Doctors Without Borders, one of the things that I'm inspired by is that it's not just an organization that's providing medical aid, right, which is so important and so necessary, of course, but it's also an activist organization, right? They say, we believe the principles of impartiality and neutrality are not synonymous with silence. And I think as writers, that is really relatable and really connected to what we do, because to tell stories is to break the silence. So maybe we can talk a little bit about sort of the power of breaking the silence and what changes you've seen in your communities just by speaking up.
I come from Brooklyn, so I have to say we're all speaking with sort of the same. There's a lot of similarity of voice in what is a very blue state and blue county. But I've just been very inspired by people like Jackie and Jill and others, Robin, who's I know in the audience, who's not on, Robin Davidson from Texas, and what you're all, and Bella when you're in Florida, also as you straddle both states, Michigan and Florida. But to be able to really have local impact, I just want to underscore that, because I think that's what we organize as a national group of writers, but slowly but surely we've built ourselves, like it's building blocks, and we've built these state chapters and these local voices and local impact, which is really having the difference. And listening to how you're all, first of all, the roles that you've played as young poet laureates in your own communities and writers, and then the way that you're able to have local impact, that one-on-one. We tell stories as writers, but the stories we have are our stories. So having that human impact is also making a big difference.
Yes, and really starting on the community level, your smallest community level, your neighbors, people in your grocery store. I mean, just there are ways your opinion can come through in your daily existence without preaching to people. I mean, I am a fan of bumper stickers, and I get both responses. But the past week I have gotten so many big, yays from people, on the road and in the parking lot. And so there are lots of little things. I think all too often, we decide to step back, but there are ways for your beliefs to be known in a way that still is not rude, for lack of a better way to say it.
Speaking of rude, as this whole time, my office in Wisconsin is a cottage on a lake, and I've been watching this guy go back and forth on his speedboat with his Trump flag flying. And when I first saw it, I was angry about it. This was years ago. And he parks here in front of my landlord's house because he knows she's a Democrat. And I thought, at this point, it's just pathetic. And I'm getting my first bumper sticker. And I saw one in this same town, Kamala for president. So I think, endurance, let's not forget about endurance and persistence in the resistance. They're all equally important. And this is what you've done here today. And how great that you put it up for Doctors Without Borders, because I've seen those people in action in conflict zones, as I'm sure has Joanne. And I've seen them in Afghanistan and West Bank, and they do amazing work. And people survive to tell their stories because of the work they do. So that's important too. So yeah, it's been an honor, as we said at the outset.
Thank you, Jackie.
I'm sure that our audience wants to do this too, but I hope we all can stay in touch. And I encourage, as you have, Bella, too, just make sure everybody who's in the audience signs up for Writers for Democratic Action. You don't have to be a writer to support us. Please go to our website and sign up so that you can be part of our community.
And when does the youth anthology Would you come out? You were thinking after Labor Day?
Yes, our goal, hopefully, we will do our best to get it out on Labor Day. We have been, I think we've met 3 or 4 times this month, just dedicated to the anthology to do this selection. We've had a lot of very powerful and passionate meetings, which I feel very inspired by. So hopefully our anthology will come out soon. There's a lot of other YWDA projects that are happening that any of our viewers can support. We are running a critical writing series called On the Ballot, Critical Writing in Critical Times. We are doing all sorts of things. Our email is youngwritersforda@gmail.com. You can reach out to us at any time. If you have questions about the election, if you have questions about what you can do for your community, please be invited to reach out to us. Feel free to contact us at any time. Most likely you will reach myself or one of our other members of the committee, and we are very happy to be in contact with anyone who wants to be in contact with us. So I think that is a good place to wrap up. I want to thank everyone so much for joining and for sticking around. Even if you were only able to see a part of this, if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for being with us when you're able. And thank you to Books and Books and Sophie Perez for hosting us today and for helping us navigate Crowdcast and readings in the digital age. And if you are able and willing, please donate to Doctors Without Borders. Again, that's doctorswithoutborders.org. You can read more about what they're doing and learn about the different ways that you can support them if you're not financially able to support them. And thank you again, everyone, for being with us. Thank you to all of my fellow panelists for your time. And I'm so elated to have spent my Sunday afternoon with you all.